Have you always been tinkering with photography and videography, like even as a kid, like skate videos? Like, what was the genesis of your interest and aptitude in the arts?
Yeah, so this is actually a really timely and interesting question. I actually have my first camera right here. I found it last year, actually buried in a box at my mom's. I had made like a top handle for it and stuff, but this was like my first camera, little handy cam that I feel like everyone had these back in the day with like a fisheye on it.
Is that much of it? That's not much of a change for you, right?
My name is Carey. I used to load bombs in the Air Force, and now I'm a writer, a filmmaker, and an entrepreneur. Through using the post 9/11 GI Bill to go to college, working hourly jobs to pay the bills, and freelancing my way into a career, I've studied what it takes to successfully transition from service to civilian, and that study has become a conversation. On this podcast, I speak to other veterans, successful artists and entrepreneurs about their transition, what they did well, where they failed, what they learned, and most importantly, how they applied their skills. Episode 90 features Paul Alkoby, an Air Force veteran, prolific content creator, take no shitter, and all-around good dude. Welcome. This is Veteran Made. This episode is sponsored by Go Pills, my new favorite nootropic that I am still continuing to use, that I stack with some other nootropics that I was using before. It is an excellent product, and I'm seeing improvement over time as I continue to use it, which is the main reason that I do use it. I'm interested in both immediate brain performance as well as long-term brain health, and this product is providing both. I've seen a significant uptick in mental ability as well as acuity and performance on the physical front as well. It has replaced my pre-workout in some instances, like earlier today. So once again, this episode is sponsored by Go Pills. Code VM15 at checkout for 15% off. That's VM15 at checkout, gopills.com. Enjoy the episode.
All right. Good morning, Paul Alkoby. Welcome to Veteran Made.
Good morning. How's it going, man?
It's going well. Long time coming. Glad we made it work, and glad it happened a little serendipitously. I guess we were texting about something else, and the thing we were talking about doing kind of fell through, and I'm like, well, that means we might have some time. You want to record an episode? And you said, hell yeah, let's do it.
Yep. Glad we could. I feel like we've been trying to do this for a few years, so finally
Yeah.
worked out.
Yeah, no doubt. I was thinking about this the other day. You and I were just offline. We're talking about Aaron Love, mutual friend and connection. I remember when I was thinking about this the other day when we were texting. I was in my apartment in Brooklyn in Bushwick. Gosh, this had to have been like 6 or 7 years ago now at this point. And he and I got reconnected over text, and I was kind of filling him in on what I was doing. And he's like, "Oh, I've got a buddy who does something like that as well. You two should connect." And I'm like, "Yeah, for sure." And then we just, he and I kind of kept talking and kept getting in touch. And then I never made the connection that once you and I connected, that you were the person that he was talking about. So here we are in 2024. A lot's transpired since 2018.
Yeah. Yes, it definitely has.
Yeah. For those who don't know you, which is probably few and far between in the audience, but for those who don't know you, if you could just give us a brief primer on who you are, where and when you served, and then we'll jump into some entrepreneurial creative questions here.
Yeah. Paul Alkoby. I currently live just outside Raleigh, North Carolina, which has been a pretty dope transition. Was in the Air Force, active duty from 2012 to 2016. Got out and have kind of been going into a bunch of different creative rabbit holes since. Served as a medic and bounced around from Germany to Cannon Air Force Base. So
nice. What do you consider yourself now? Like, if somebody said, like, what are you? Are you a photographer? Are you a videographer? Are you a cinematographer? What do you call yourself?
dude, honestly, it's such a weird one, and I've had these conversations with people, and I definitely struggle with that kind of identity piece. But I've kind of opted to just say filmmaker sometimes because it's just easier.
Yeah.
And I guess at that point, it's, I've put out a couple of self-funded documentaries and stuff like that. I'm like, well, just say filmmaker, photographer, and that way it just limits questions. But so mostly that. or I'll just say I work in a few different creative realms,
Yeah.
which
Well,
then leads to more questions.
yeah. It's like the questions are good when they lead to answers that can get you work, right? But if it just gets
Yeah,
to more questions that get you answers, that just gets to more questions, you're having a conversation. That can be one of the tough things about being, whatever. Like I don't shoot or edit. I mean, I have edited in the past, but I don't like really shoot. I kind of write, direct, and produce. And so there's a lot of times will be some confusion from people just from just because different regions and different sizes of organizations and different things. Like they hear video producer, and they're like, "Oh, you shoot, edit." I'm like, "Well, no, that's a predator. I don't do that part. I do the other part," and then that gets confusing, and then that either leads to me getting a larger scope of work with the client, or they're passing me over and going to somebody else. So I can
yeah,
relate to that for sure.
yeah. So I mean, it also is just kind of. I feel like Stephen Pressfield talks about this too, where it's like if you're identifying as something, it kind of creates this weird back and forth within yourself. So I've definitely had that where it's like I do that, but that's I guess not who I am. So I've struggled with that piece as well in the past, but
How
which
do you?
is a whole nother topic.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it's an important one. How do you currently personally make that distinction between what you do professionally and who you are as a human?
Yeah, I mean, right now I feel like my primary income is coming in from like marketing work, and I get to shoot full time still in a way, but it's I kind of opt for, in my mind, I'm a creative because I get to kind of help build brands. And then on the outside of that, I also get to shoot and work on projects that I'm very passionate about. So for me, it's just kind of all encompassing. The best way to frame it is creative.
Yeah.
So
Have you been able to kind of like separate? Because I know you do a lot of this work, or at least you have in the past, because I've seen you kind of post about it. Like you do a lot of this kind of creative work just for yourself as well. Like you go out and shoot. I know you have a skateboarding background from your days in Philly. Um, and sometimes you just go out and shoot just for fun. And like, how do you, I mean, do you still do that? And has it been harder for you to do more of that, or do you do less of that now because you do so much professionally and you're doing marketing and kind of creative work?
I'm trying to get back to more passion focused projects, which is a big thing for me. I think I lost my way with that in really 2020, 2021, where it became so much of this just like grind mentality between having the world shut down and my freelance business kind of tank, and then going into a full time role at a company. I lost sight of why I started to do this stuff in the first place. And now it's been trying to rediscover that and kind of rekindle that fire. So it's been more of that.
And you find jumping back and forth between things that you do for passion and things you're doing for work help you with that? Like, what does it help you find when you do that?
Well, first and foremost, I think we always have to evolve. And I personally am not happy with where I am at. It's like, I came up with other cinematographers I'll use specifically, and I watch them and some of the stuff they're doing, and there's no envy there. There's no like jealousy of any sort. I'm, if anything, motivated by it. I'm like, yo, that was absolutely fucking amazing. Excuse my language, but that's where it goes for me is I get to see my friends kind of level up and do this amazing work, whether it's client work or passion projects, and I want to elevate myself and be able to do similar stuff. So now I look at that and I'm trying to kind of rediscover who I am creatively, and build on stuff and experiment more and just have fun with it.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, like it's a common term, and in our community, we use it a lot, right? Like find your tribe and kind of get with a tribe of people. But dude, the value in being around people who do excellent
I
work.
think I just lost you for a second.
Oh, are we there?
I just lost you for a second. Yeah, it was like 20-second drop.
Could you hear me, or was it just the visual was,
It just cut out. Couldn't hear you either.
huh? Sometimes, sometimes Riverside does this, but it's all good. Yeah, just let me know if it happens again. Sometimes it'll
Yep.
freeze, but it's just because it's collecting the visual, but it'll actually be doing it. Yeah.
Yeah.
speaking of things that I know nothing about technically, I'm like, yeah, no, I'm pretty sure that's how it works because I haven't really had any problems yet. So here we go. But yeah, I mean, finding your tribe, is something that I think that gets spoken about a lot, like even in just outside of the veteran community and the military community, but even with like the Press Fields and the Tim Ferrisses and like kind of Ryan Holidays and like all those people who kind of occupy that niche, all these books that everybody reads and reposts quotes from. But I think that's the obvious truth, right? Is find your tribe and find the non-obvious truth. There is like, go find people who are going to be excellent and do excellent work as an example, but that are also going to encourage you relationally and personally. And also when you see their work, it isn't going to make you jealous. Like you said, it's going to want to
Yeah.
kind of make you take your work to the next level. That was my biggest struggle transitioning out of the military and film school and into advertising specifically, is like, it is such a hierarchical world in a very different way than the military. It's like you're working in advertising agencies and people are like, well, if you haven't put in your time, time in service, correctly and for the right amount of time and hit these specific milestones in this specific order, just like I did, then you can't have this next step kind of deal. And it's like, I'm like a few years behind because I served in the military and went to film school. I'm trying to build a career and like do fun stuff here. Like, can't we just work together? So it's hard enough. This industry is hard enough. This life is hard enough. Can't we just work together and help each other and be good people to
Yep.
each other?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously a very cutthroat industry, and there's a lot of just really weird circumstances that happen. And we're talking about kind of like building bridges and networking offline, and it's sometimes you approach those with the purest of intentions, and on the backside, you're like, wait, I just kind of got used for my network. Um, so stuff like that definitely does happen, and it's kind of navigating that stuff, especially getting out of the military, has been uh, tricky to say the least,
Yeah.
because you want to be very direct with people, and sometimes that doesn't go over well. And I've had to kind of navigate that tightrope and figure out better ways to approach conversations like that. So
Yeah, I just look at that though as another, like, and this is the more mature version of me. I just turned 36, right? Like 10 years ago when I was just getting started in the industry, I wouldn't have thought this way. Like what I was just hearing you describe was an opportunity to get better at something that's only going to help you get better in the future. It's right, this very iterative process. Whereas 10 years ago, I would have been like, oh man, you're right, that sucks. It's never going to get better. And it's like, well,
yeah,
no, you live and you learn, you work and you learn, you build these relationships. Sometimes they go well and they're reciprocal. Sometimes they don't go well and you get used.
yep.
And that sucks, but at least it gives you kind of an opportunity to learn something and build another experience and skill that you can build off of moving forward.
Oh, absolutely. And it's just that process, right? And I think a lot of it comes down to enjoying that process and understanding that you know people come from different backgrounds. We all are kind of trying to find our way, and we're all going to do things differently. It's a big part of right now. I'm actually enrolled in a veterans cohort that's been very transformative for me. And I mean, the coursework has been amazing, and kind of the community aspect has allowed me to really look and see how other people are doing things, and learn from these people that are pretty far ahead of me, both personally and professionally. So it's been a very eye-opening experience in that realm.
Have you always been that way? Have you always been somebody that wants to have that example kind of ahead of you as somebody to look? I'm thinking of like McConaughey's best Oscar speech, like somebody to look up to, somebody to look forward to, like that kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure. I think I grew up, I was an only child, so a lot of the times I was looking outside of my household to kind of have maybe more inspiration, motivation, stuff like that. So being able to kind of see someone achieve something or do something allows me to know that it's possible, right? Or uh, even to kind of exceed that in some ways, which I don't think I have in many other ways that I would like to yet. But yeah, it's a great, having that example is a great way for me to kind of navigate forward and be like, oh, like that that makes total sense. I can do that.
Yeah, I've always been that way as well. Like, when people say like, I just when people say like, oh, it must be hard to have other people, that are doing so much. I'll use a weird example. My wife played golf in college, so she's really good. She played at Ole Miss, SEC, 4-year letter winner. She's incredible. I don't know if you play golf or not. Doesn't really
No.
matter. So, but I'm an athlete, like, ran track, played basketball, played football, love sports. Like I've always been like an active, skate, surf, snow, growing up in California, everything. So golf was something I picked up later in life. And she is really, 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 really good because she played in college. And so when I tell other dudes that I go play golf with my wife, they always kind of laugh. And then they'll be like, "Oh, well, you must beat her ass." And I'm like, no, other way around. And they're like, "Oh man, that must suck." And I'm like, no, 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 you don't understand. Her being so much better at golf makes me that much better. Not that I'm any good, but it makes me that much better because every time I'm out with her, I have that thing to look forward to, that thing to look up to. And that's kind of what I'm striving for. And then through that process of what's obviously very frustrating for me because the gap is so large, I've learned to enjoy that process of being not as good at something as I can be and not knowing how good I will be in the future, but like working that process in a way that will allow me to get wherever it is that I'm going. And it's something silly like golf, which ultimately at the end of the day doesn't matter, but it's
Yeah.
fun and something we can do together. And it's like, it's a really good, kind of microcosm for some of these other things that might matter more professionally or interpersonally or relationally.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great way of looking at it. And, I imagine it's it's got to be just an interesting dynamic because you're subconsciously like elevating your game every time you go out with her. Like
Right.
you, you anytime, right? Like personally, I've definitely, even just dating, I've been on dates where it's like mini golf or something. Like I'm winning. I'm not, I'm not gonna sit here and you're gonna try to win. Like
Yeah.
there's no.
Yeah.
So that's got to be fun. That's got to be a
Yeah.
fun dynamic.
I mean, it is fun, and I never win, and we're at a spot where she's like, "All right, I'll give you two strokes a hole." I don't know, get into all the golf thing. All that was just to say it was like an example of kind of what you're talking about, where it's low stakes in the sense that it doesn't particularly matter, but it does help me kind of understand some of these other ways of working and living in
Yeah.
these professional settings, creative settings, entrepreneurial settings, whatever it might be. Have you always been tinkering with photography and videography, like even as a kid, like skate videos? Like what was the genesis of your interest and aptitude in the arts?
Yeah. So this is actually a really timely and interesting question. So I actually have my first camera right here.
No way.
So this is like my first. I found it last year, actually buried in a box at my mom's. I had made like a top handle for it and stuff, but this was like my first camera, little handy cam that I feel like everyone had these back in the day with like a fisheye on it.
Yeah,
So,
that's sick.
but so that was so that was my first like video camera. I had a bunch of like you get those like digital cameras, and even when I was like 7, 8 years old, I found photos recently from just those disposable film cameras and like Polaroids and stuff from skating, and just like in front of my mom's house and stuff. So I think I've always been drawn to cameras, and I didn't get fully into it until a mentor of mine who he was actually like a graffiti legend in Philly. Uh, Unfortunately, he passed away 2 weeks ago, and there's a lot of murky circumstances around that. People are trying to kind of navigate, and so I don't want to speak too soon on that. But yeah, it's looking back, I've been reflecting on that a lot, and he was a photographer. We did like a portrait session once, and that really ignited that spark for me going forward and kind of pushed me to really find that passion in it. And I had, going through high school, just kind of lost it. I got in a lot of trouble in high school and almost didn't graduate. But joining the military, I kind of stuffed a lot of that creative side of me away. So when I got out and trying to find that again, that was really the first thing that came to mind for me was picking up a camera again. So
Was that were you aware of that as you were doing it, or did you look for the camera, or did the camera kind of find you at that period in your life?
it kind of found me. I'd gotten out and I had just started teaching TCCC for a company, and I was kind of just messing with like video for for like CrossFit stuff, just like my own training and just, fun kind of stuff. And work had asked me to shoot some stuff for them because they needed marketing stuff. And that was kind of where it started progressing. And then I started just getting offered work. It wasn't great. I definitely look back on some of that stuff like, man, that was horrible. But it was a start, and that's kind of for me. I'm pretty happy that happened because otherwise, I mean, I would either be contracting or just kind of I don't know where I'd be, but probably not doing what I want to do.
Yeah, no doubt. I think we're all probably in that in that same boat where it's like, man, that's kind of part of where part of why I started this podcast was because, listen, there are people that want to get in out of the military and into back into medical or IT or supply or logistics or contracting, and they love that work, but there are a lot of people like us who were doing medical stuff or flight line stuff, and they're like, well, I kind of want to do something different. I don't know what that is. And so these anecdotes, these anecdotal stories, this repositories kind of helps a lot of folks find like, oh yeah, well, you can actually just fall into something if you just put different things in front of you. What was that question or when they asked you the question to shoot some marketing materials, were you immediately like, yes, I want to do this, or were you hesitant?
No, I was stoked on it.
Yeah.
I shot a couple. Uh, we had a few T-Triple-C classes that we were doing for some like state agencies. So I shot some stuff there and just kind of bounced around with that. And I was supposed to move into more of a marketing role at the company, and it fell through in time, but it just kind of ignited that spark for me of oh, I probably should be doing more of this. So,
What
and I think I still went with like the contract mentality for a while of like, oh, I need to get further in the contracts. And I'm glad that kind of dissipated over time. But
Well, yeah. So that's my next question, and I want to kind of go down that path because you and I have had similar experiences in recent years, freelancing versus contracting versus working full time and moonlighting, and trying to figure out like how to navigate the opportunities while also being respectful and ethical to the people that you're working with. So as you got into this industry, starting to shoot some of those marketing materials, and you were thinking about extending contracts, did you have any idea like how to manage like a sales pipeline for yourself, or were you just like, hey, I'm going to do a job and then a job and then a job? Like how were you thinking about freelancing and contracting initially?
dude, it was bad. I like into my money management and just the way I viewed things was horrible. I lived pretty much, check to check. Didn't I like only until I'd say probably about a year and a half, 2 years ago, have I really started to kind of understand, learn, and question all that stuff and start figuring out how to manage all that. And I think that's a huge flaw. Not obviously, I think in the American education system, but also in the military when we're getting out, we have no real education on that stuff and how to manage because every 2 weeks money's coming in, like unless some weird stuff happens in the government, I guess. But I got out and it was just, yeah, like, oh, I'm gonna go buy this right now, and not even thinking like I was like, oh, I have enough to cover my bills this month. I'm good. I'm not putting money away. Or so when I went into freelance, it was kind of the same mindset, and I didn't even know about like anything in regards to write-offs or how to kind of manage any of that stuff. So I would just buy gear because I wanted to buy gear, and it made there's that like gear acquisition syndrome where you're like just buying gear because it makes you feel good. You're like, yeah, I need this lens, I need this. So that was pretty much me for quite a few years,
Yeah,
and then turning that around now.
yeah, yeah. You're like, I'm going to spend money on this lens, and then ask a client if I can use it on the shoot. They're going to say no, and then I'm going to use it anyway and not charge them just because I want to use the lens that I've then already spent. Money on the lens. You're like
Yep.
double in the hole because you might kind of want to try some stuff, and you're like, yeah, it'll totally pay off. Were you thinking about like a career? Did you have career aspirations that early in the process? Like, were you thinking, oh, if I start here, I can work my way into this kind of role or have this kind of business or work in this kind of vertical? Like, what was the level of intention that you set at the time?
I mean, honestly, no. The reality for me is my mental health was so bad that I was just kind of going day to day. And I mean, truthfully, until 2 years ago, I didn't even have like a 5 year idea, not even a plan, like an idea. I didn't think I was going to make it to 30, man, if I'm being honest. So I never really had those thoughts, only until now, kind of taking accountability the last few years and really deep diving into my mental health. So
What was the what has that transition been like for you? So like being on the other side um, of those challenges, and then now it sounds like you are, as of like 2 years ago, starting to think about your career arc and thinking about entrepreneurial finance and things like that. Like what has it been like to be? What is it like to be on the other side of that and to start to think about those things more intentionally?
yeah, so it's kind of crazy. It's 3 years today. I remember today's actually my mom's birthday. So it was 3 years today that I was going through episodes of like depersonalization and really where, aside from where I had a suicide attempt, uh, was like the lowest point I've been at in my life. And I pretty much started ketamine assisted therapy with the help of Heroic Hearts Project, and was able to start tapping into all that. And that's what I think has contributed so greatly to now to be able to kind of find these transitional points in my life where I'm looking at the world as like a viable option of sorts, right? It's like, oh, I can do this. I can change directions here or try this. And for me, it's been pretty eye opening. I mean, it's been amazing to say the least. So
Yeah, it's obviously like having known you fairly well, not super well, and kind of observed some of these things and interacted a bit on social and seen what you've talked about on that front. Like one of the things that I have observed and respect so much is that it would have been very easy for you to kind of to take that journey to go the psychedelic route and then just like make everything about mental health and everything about psychedelics and everything about that, when in reality what it seems like you've done, and I want to hear from your perspective, is you took that experience, it worked really well for you, is working well for you. I'm not sure like what the protocol is now for you,
yeah,
and you've moved forward in a very integrated fashion. Like you're like you said, you're thinking about a professional arc, you're thinking about finances, you're like you've been very vocal about the conflict in Israel and Palestine. You did quite a bit of work with the Afghanistan withdrawal. Like you didn't just be like, cool, like I'm good now that I got this psychedelic therapy and I'm just going to be an evangelist for just that. Now you're like, well, no, actually I have a whole life, I'm living a whole life, like let me go gung ho and put my whole self out there. Was that intentional for you, and was that a part of like did that desire to do that acutely happen during the treatment?
I think the desire to do that was always there. I've had so many different facets of my life where I have a pretty wide array of interests, right? So it's always kind of been there, but I was in this, constant state of fight or flight, right? So I wasn't able to kind of tap into a lot of the other things that I was, passionate about or wanted to do or explore. And that allowed me to figure out all these tools to be able to accurately express myself or even just process things that were going on around me. So yeah, at the end of the day, it's a tool, right? And a lot of people will take that leap. And I've talked to really good friends about it. I've talked to mentors, coaches in the space as well. And there's a lot of people that go down that path and they're just in it. And it's like I made a post recently, and a few people definitely took it the wrong way. But that's kind of what it's for sometimes. And I made a post about people jumping on nonstop retreats to kind of escape their life. And sometimes you have to lean into the difficult things in your life to actually make progress, instead of trying to escape it with, a reset of sorts. And I see people going on a retreat every month. It's like you're not taking the time to do the work and integrate the skills and the tools that you're going to pick up in that retreat in your life. You're kind of just taking a little bit of something and you're like, oh, I got to go back to this retreat and learn more. But you can't even effectively apply something in 20 to 30 days, and then you're going through another experience, psychedelic or not. There's various different types of things going on in the space that I think are very real and very, very effective, but time is important there as well.
Yeah, I mean, and you bring up like other things, not just psychedelics, like even the the authors and the books that we were referencing before. I love Press. You brought up Pressfield first.
Yeah.
I love Pressfield. I've got all of his books right over here on my bookshelf. I use a different highlighter and different pen every time I read through it, and there's just dozens of colors in each of those books. I love them,
Yep.
but I will read them and then go work on a project, or I will be working on a project, getting stuck, go back and read, and then go back to the project and work. Right, like you can read the Daily Stoic and then not actually put any of that into practice. But just because you started your day with an email from Ryan Holiday doesn't mean that you're going to do anything with it. No disrespect to Ryan. But it's just to your point, like all of these things are tools. And I think, our community in particular, just because it's where you and I operate, so we have the most insight into, we can get hung up on a lot of these things, get really excited about a lot of these things. And then you look at the output, and the output is either not there or the output is the same over and over and over again. And I don't notice that with you. I notice the output from you is very different and very, not even different, but it's like you have a diverse array of outputs from personal projects to professional projects. And you and I obviously talk offline quite a bit about different client work and like how how to navigate, which client to work with, which client not to work with. And there's obviously a necessity there to like, hey, I got to go take this client. Where I was just talking with a buddy. I just got back from Boston, was working on a project at Staples. And the creative director that I was working with, who hired me for that job, he and I were talking about a job that came up that he got RFP'd for, that he wanted to bring me on for production. And we both like kind of looked at the RFP and we're both like, I mean, we will do this work and we will, it'll help pay some bills, but it's not going to go on our portfolio, and it's not something that we're going to like advertise. And it's nothing bad, it's nothing like unethical, anything like that, but it's just something that we're like, all right, cool. We're at that stage in our professional lives where we kind of have to make some of those decisions. Like what's the income decision? What's the, the Clooney rule, right? Like I do 2 for them, so I can do 1 for me kind of deal. So how have you navigated contracting, freelancing, full-time? You've I don't want to say bounced around because that makes it sound negative, but you've worked your way with and through a couple of different organizations over the last few years, but then also done a lot of freelance work. How do you look at that now? And what's your approach to building a client base and that sales pipeline?
Yeah, I think, in the past, I mean, just to kind of take accountability, there's definitely been some negative aspects to it. Like I've definitely had some bad business deals, stuff like that. So fortunately,
that's part of the journey. I mean, we can talk about if you want, because I think those are helpful too. But however you want to.
Oh yeah, I'm pretty much an open book for a lot of things. So I think there's right now where I'm at is, I had this like full-time job in Florida that kind of blew up right after the Afghan stuff disappeared, and there were a lot of different dynamics there that people were navigating, and it just got weird at the end, to the point like the CEO of the company went on a fishing trip and posted a photo on social media, and I had seen the photo, and I had known it was like a Wounded Warrior kind of trip. It was, I forget which organization it was through, but the guy they took out was actually one of my patients who came to launch school, like right before it was actually one that hit me pretty hard. So there were a lot of weird circumstances around that where I had to like look to the universe and be like, whoa, why did this just happen? Like, how did this just happen? Right. And then that job totally disappeared 3 weeks after I had kind of went through some of the craziest stuff in my life, which, being the Afghan withdrawal. So that pushed me I shut down for quite a few months after that in terms of just trying to reflect and figure out what the next step was. Ended up losing my apartment My rent was increased a ton, and then my mom got sick. So I jetted right back to Philly, and I was out of work, right? Like I couldn't leave. I was taking care of her. So for 5 months, I slept on her living room floor, and that was it for me. So coming back from that, I took a pretty much a 24-hour turnaround with Patrol Base Abate. They hit me up for book club in 2022, and I fly out there just really on the back end of a bunch of heavy stuff. I'd had the opportunity of like, oh, I can actually dip out for a little bit. So I land and I find out we're actually picking up Leo Jenkins from the airport, which longtime friend. He was my coach back in the day when he was doing CrossFit programming, stuff like that in like 2012, 2013. So that allowed me to really push back into my creative pathways because I hadn't even touched my camera in months. Like I just didn't. So going from there, I was back kind of in that freelance mindset and was like, well, how do I kind of turn and burn on this? So I went back home from that trip with not a ton of money in my pocket, like definitely not enough to really like live off of. But I was like, well, I'm gonna get in my truck and just drive around and shoot for people, and literally just went out west and kind of just I shot for a few off-road shops and just like was making enough just to like cover food and stuff. So that was the way back in for me. And it was a great way back in because it allowed me to kind of have to not even cold call, like talk to people face to face. I'm like at an off-road shop. Yeah. So you guys have some really cool builds. What's up? So
Yeah, I mean, no better organization. Like Leo's a friend of the show. I mean, so many people at PB Abate and then Dead Reckoning are friends of the show, either been on or I work with in some capacity. No better group of people to get back into this stuff with than them. And it's a beautiful film. I'll share it out again on IG before this episode goes live early next week so people can watch. And then also, I just want to acknowledge one thing. We're not skipping over the Afghan withdrawal because it's not important. So anybody who wants to hear Paul's story, I can point you to several different excellent podcasts that he's talked about it. So we're not dismissing it as an experience in Paul's life. It's just not something we're talking about here. But for those that want to hear that story, several podcasts out there that I can point you in the right direction. Just shoot me a note and I'll send you the best ones on that front. So in terms of like hopping, and you and I were texting a bit during that period because there was a project I was trying to bring you onto, a couple other projects that we had talked about. And so I kind of had an idea of where you were and what you were doing. I have ties to Orlando, you in Orlando. We're talking about those different things.
Yep.
What was it like for you? I mean, that's a bad way to ask that question. Let me start over. You seem like somebody who has just no problem doing what you just described, which is walk up to somebody and be like, got some beautiful trucks here. I've got a camera. What do you say we put them together here and see what happens? Like, have you always been that way, or is that something you've had to work on?
I think I've always been that way. It's funny thinking back on it. Like I was cold calling companies as like a 10-year-old, it like skateboarding to get like to be like, hey, like you want to sponsor me? Like and I wasn't even, to be clear, I wasn't even a great skater by any means.
Yeah.
I was just willing to call these companies and ask for free stuff to like market for them. So I've always had, I think, a marketing / networking mindset. And a lot of it does stem from my parents both worked for themselves. And, I used to have to sit with my mom. She was a independent contractor and worked in department stores selling fragrances. So I would have to sit there during the holiday season because I had no one to watch me at home. And I'm like sitting on the floor watching my mom like hustle perfume to people pretty much my entire upbringing. So
Yeah.
might have lung cancer from all the fragrances and not the military, but
Yeah. Burn pits have nothing on the ground floor of Macy's.
Dude,
During Christmas.
I can't go into department stores. Like I just can't do it anymore. Like a fragrance section, I'm like, no, thank you. Don't go to malls, nothing. So
that's so funny. My sister-in-law got married last year, and my other brother-in-law, not the one that sister-in-law was marrying, but the other one, and I were out with my daughter before the wedding, going to the mall to like grab a bunch of different stuff. And I was trying to find this specific tiara that my wife and sisters-in-law were asking for, and we ended up going into one of those ground floors of those department stores, and she walked in, and like I could just see her like nose just go, and she's like 3.5 at the time. She's like, what is this? And like she just like found the perfume and found the jewelry and like found all that stuff, and she was just like, whoa. And it just like took me back to, not, I didn't have the same experience of you as a
Yeah.
kid. Like obviously I was like, man, it made me think of so many things. Mall rats, all kinds of things. Like malls
Oh
are,
yeah.
yeah, it's a dying thing, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately
It's
for you.
interesting. Yeah.
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 So you kind of got that entrepreneurial bent from your parents, and kind of observed that relationship building and kind of selling process. So looking back now, from where you are sitting here in Raleigh to that trip out west to drive around and kind of sell your services, a la carte, so to speak, along the way, like what have you done from then until now to get to the spot that you're at, and what is your approach to building relationships and that sales pipeline now?
Yeah. So from then until now, it's been an interesting path. I didn't expect to end up in Raleigh, that's for sure. This was not, it was not even a
On
thought.
your bingo card?
Yeah, so I ended up, I went back to Philly and I was doing some stuff there. And then I was driving down to Florida for a Burning Man event, like a regional one. And my plan, I stopped in Orlando, stayed with some friends who also shoot and also work in marketing. And we kind of like discussed things, and they put the offer on the table. They're like, hey, why don't you like live with us? We can kind of work together. And I was like, listen, guys, I kind of want to do my own thing. Like I love you guys, and I don't want anything to come in between the friendship potentially. Like, let's just, we'll roll it this way for now. So I started looking for places in Florida. It's not panning out. And then I literally went on Facebook Marketplace and just kind of was thinking about affordable places. I wanted to go out west, be closer to the mountains. It just wasn't at the time. A buddy of mine, actually Jarrett, he was a Ranger Comcam dude. We were shooting together a little bit. He was in Orlando. He was moving to Colorado. We were going to move out there together. And then we just couldn't, it just wasn't lining up. So I happened to be on Facebook Marketplace, saw a place in Raleigh, which is where I am now. And someone had a lease takeover, this beautiful apartment, everything looked great. And I just hit them up, and it kind of just fell in my lap. So it was one of those, this door's opening, I should probably jump on it. I got my stuff out of storage and showed up here. Not more out of the affordability piece, because it was a great way to set up a base and start building and figuring out which kind of industries I wanted to get into. I had some friends locally that I knew could potentially introduce me to some folks. And that's where I think it comes down to. The networking piece is, I genuinely enjoy hearing people's stories and just want to meet people, right? Like, outside of my business, I like just hooking people up with each other for their businesses or their personal or passion projects. So I've always found that really interesting. And, occasionally it works out on the business side for me, but I've never had that intent of like, oh, I need to meet this person for business. It's like, I just like introducing cool people to each other. So
Yeah, and you just happen to, I mean, you find yourself around a bunch of different cool people, but it's also like that process sort of like goes in on itself. Like it's very circular in a good way. Like it drives itself. Like you're cool, so you're around cool people, so you hook them up with cool people, and then those relationships that fizzle or it doesn't work out. It's never like a bad thing. It's just kind of, all right, cool, that one didn't work out. Like whatever. You're just thinking
yeah,
about how to keep connecting people. Yeah.
yeah, and it's,
Excuse me.
bless you.
Thanks.
Yeah, and it's been interesting too.
Killing me right now. I've never had allergies until after COVID. I don't know if there's like correlation there or not, but it's just like all of a sudden
Maybe.
every late March, early April, my dome just gets attacked. It's terrible.
Yeah, it's not fun. I'm surprised down here it hasn't been horrible for me. It's like I see people suffer down here though. The
Yeah.
pollen, like I'll walk outside in the morning, everything's just covered in pollen.
Ugh.
It's but yeah, it's been an interesting kind of path to navigate, because also within that, it's like I'm coming out of this almost coming up on almost a decade of really battling like a mental health piece for myself. And I've been actually I've been working on a piece kind of in conjunction with Heroic Hearts on my experience. And I found these like Facebook lives I did in 2016 and I ripped them from Facebook. And I was watching through those. And I'm like, man, I was struggling back then. Like I was watching kind of the indicators and the stuff I was talking about in those videos. I'm like, I've been bad for a long time. Like, and now, and I catch this because I'll go places and I have to kind of fight myself sometimes to actually say hi to people or interact with people and not shut off. Whereas on my trip out west, and I think what was so freeing and so good about that trip was it pushed me so far out of my element and I had to challenge myself. So any new town I went into, I had this mindset of I have to talk to 3 people. So if I went to like, I don't drink, like I'll have 2 drinks a year. But I would go to like a bar, like a dive bar or something, get a drink, like a cider, and just sit at the bar and talk to someone that seemed interesting. And it was like a goal of like, I have to talk to 3 people here. So that's kind of what I try to do much of the time now. And sometimes it works, but I think a lot of it comes down to routine. So I have to break out of that routine sometimes in order to kind of facilitate new growth. So I have a regular coffee shop I go to. I love it, but sometimes there I'm too comfortable. So I won't go there. I'll go somewhere else where it's like, oh, I have to talk to someone. So I'll do stuff like that. Like I'll have these like little tricks I'll play on myself in order to maybe like, I don't even want to call it network, but for my mental health, I have to network because I know it's going to keep me from shutting down.
And what you're describing is you're actually, that's interesting. So you need to make yourself a little bit more uncomfortable in order to facilitate that relationship building.
Yep. Yeah. Because if I don't, I mean, like I was saying, I think a lot of it stems from being an only child. I've had times, especially when I lived alone and I was like really in my depression, I actually didn't have my dog with me then. He was up at my parents because I had a bunch of work that I was supposed to do. And I just was like, I'm going to leave him up here until I get settled and I'll come get him. And I just couldn't get away. And I would shut down. And unless I was at work, which I didn't really have to go to work, I was partially remote. And I would just shut down. Like I wouldn't talk to anyone. I would just like go in my little hole pretty much. And I have a couple friends I'll call on a semi-daily basis. But like it was, yeah, I'll shut down. Like I just won't talk. Be like, I don't need to talk to anyone.
I'm comfortable. I'm here where I am. And so I'm just going to kind of keep this going. And then if you do, there's an interesting lesson in there. So like making yourself uncomfortable like is the key to growth.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's the only way. I mean, I'm doing it right now where we were on so I'm doing, do you know Mike Bledsoe?
I don't.
So he started the Barbell Shrug podcast years ago. And that's how I initially started following him. I was still coaching in CrossFit and loved their podcast. And he's a Navy veteran. He got out before 2010, but he started this, it's called the Mission After. And that's the cohort I've been in. So we had a coaching call the other day, and one of the coaches, Michael, said something about he does Toastmasters, and for some reason it triggered something where I was like, wait a second, I wanted to go to Toastmasters years ago, and I felt like too ashamed to go. And I've had these experiences where I've been too ashamed to pursue like formal education or any type of group class setting out of this like shame or embarrassment. So now my challenge to myself is this week I'm going to go find a class to do like a cooking class or whatever, but it's pushing those boundaries for myself because there's a lot of stuff I'm willing to be uncomfortable doing and there's stuff I'm not.
Sure.
And I know that facilitating that type of environment will just force me to go down a rabbit hole further and be like, oh, like that wasn't that bad. I'll go do a class in this. I'll try this. So.
Yeah. It's man, so interesting. Routine is something that gets put up on a pedestal as if it's something that everybody should have like down to. I mean, we've all seen the funny memes, right? Where it's like, I get up at the Mark Wahlberg ones, right? Like I get up at 3:45 a.m. I work out from 3:45 to 4:15. Then I pray from 4:15 to
Yep.
5:30, and then I eat breakfast. My first, like whatever. It kind of goes through that whole thing, and you're like, dang, like, oh man, that's impressive. Oh, that's this. Oh, that's that. And it's like, dude, if you ever have to deviate from that routine, if that's your routine, like you're screwed. It's like,
Yeah.
Aubrey Marcus has talked about this quite a bit. Like you can over optimize really, really easily, and then you find yourself unable to adapt to just like daily life. But then B, to your point, like unable to actually get out and relate to other human beings because if it's not a part of your routine, then well, I can't do it because it's not a part of my routine. But next thing you know, you're just in a room for a year.
And I think one of the other things too that a lot of people have to remember about folks like that, right? Like Mark Wahlberg, or I mean, the biggest one, I think the couple in our community, I would say Jocko and like David Goggins, right? Even though they're at a level of success where they have so many people to manage other things in their lives.
Yeah.
So they have, teams of people, whereas like you and I, we're kind of doing our thing, right? So, and I respect that they have that and they can do that. Like Mark Wahlberg, I'm sure has quite a few employees that are able to kind of manage things for him. But you and I, it's like we get a client call or we get, you have a daughter, right? You have one kid.
One kid, yeah, one kid right
Yeah.
now.
So it's like your daughter needs something. You're not. Everything else is going out the window. You're doing that.
I wanted to shave and put some pomade, some out of regs that I've still got left over from Tim in my hair this morning. But it's like, no, the routine with my daughter went the way that it went this morning. I got her off to school and I maximized that time with her. And then I'm here with a backwards hat and looking like dog shit. But here we are having a conversation. Yeah. I don't have a staff.
I'm actually really bummed I almost had a out of reg shirt on during this podcast.
Dude, it's faded, man, because I've had it for so many years. I gotta text him. And
is it the Hawaiian one?
It's the bomb one.
Okay, yeah. I still have a little stash too. The clay one was the best. That was Dirty Mike. That was the best one.
I literally have. I text him every time I finish a new tin. I'm like, hey man, I bought 12, for the Everything Must Go sale. I'm down to 6. Like, I don't know what's going to happen when you get through the pipeline, but
it's like, hurry up, man, figure this out. Let's go.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's.
Well, I mean, the point is that, like, yeah, I mean, you bring up a great point, and that's just something people don't realize. Like, Dwayne Johnson is another example. Like, these people put out good things, for us to learn and for us to consume, and like, it's not all bad, but we do need to realize that different people have different, everybody is different. Every body is different, right? Like Jocko has a gene that allows him to sleep for 37 minutes a day. The rest of us have to get 8 hours. Like that's just the way that it works. So if you don't think that his body is different than yours, then you're just not paying attention, right? And I think he does a pretty good job of acknowledging some of those things and allowing for some of those things, but it's on us, I think, as like consumers to be more thoughtful about what we're doing instead of just scrolling and being like, well, Jocko said this or Tim Ferriss said this or, whatever. It's just like, be better. Don't ask them to be better. You be better.
I think a lot of times too. And I think a lot of people I think most people, we all think we're elite, right? So we all see like Jocko doing that. We're like, I could do that. Right. It's just a mindset thing. And I think sometimes there's a level of reality there that people need. And I do think Jocko does a good job of acknowledging that, but I think people don't want to hear that is the main thing.
Yeah.
So,
well, I mean, the other thing is to take a look at like, who are you and what do you want? Right. Like, do you want Jocko's life? No, I don't want Jocko's life. I want my life. So I'm going to work with, my wife and my daughter and the people in my immediate circle to be like, all right, how do we carve out the best integrated life that we can live that provides, meaning across the board? Some of that's professional, some of that's creative, some of that's passion stuff, some of that's trying new things, and some of that's a little bit of routine here and there. Like most of us, I think I want to make sure that I'm using we language. So I'm not just like telling, because I make this mistake too. Like we all forget like who we are and that we're looking inside of a cube at somebody else's life. And if there's production value, just remind yourself, if there's production value to the thing that you're watching, it is less real than you think it is.
But also, it's marketing.
Yeah.
That's the other big thing that people forget. It's like, it's marketing. It's all marketing. Social media is marketing. So,
Yeah.
and that's why I try to be pretty real about, even like my low points and stuff, because I've always been like the highlight reel and all that stuff. And I'm just like, I'm gonna just share stuff. Like I've had people straight up tell me, they're like, hey, like you could have a much bigger following if you. I'm like, I'm not doing that. I'm not running multiple pages for myself.
Yeah.
Not gonna happen. What you see is what you get.
Yeah.
Right now it's like, and I mean, I've had the last 6 months has been a very weird 6 months for me because of, like we talked briefly, skimmed over, like the Israel-Palestine conflict. It's like my family's Israeli. We're Moroccan Jews that fled Morocco in the 60s after we had a death notice put on our door. So it's like, for me now more than ever, it's like I'm proud of that. And while I openly acknowledge that I don't agree with everything the Israeli government has done, just like I don't agree with everything our government has done, even while I was in, right? And I'm fortunate that I never had to question any of my morals while I was in, being a medic. But I've had conversations with some folks that I'm like, yo, do you not remember like what we were doing? And I've definitely lost work, and I've definitely lost, I mean, I don't know if I can call them friends, but I've lost people in my life due to a lot of this now. And it's like, I'm probably realer than ever because of this, because for years I never really talked about it. And it was something that I struggled with my own identity within it. And I'm not advocating for anything other than the fact that like my family and I have a right to exist and a right to live our lives as well. And I don't want to see any innocent people get hurt anywhere. And I think in all of this, the funniest interaction I had with it was someone reached out and they're like, "You just hate Muslims." And I was like, "Really? I hate Muslims? You sure about that?" Like, and it was a pretty interesting exchange. And I was like, "Here's a link to Google search. Please
Yeah.
put my name there and see if that's accurate."
Yeah.
But yeah, it's at the end of the day, it's like it comes down to that highlight reel and all that stuff. And just, this goes back to like that sales pipeline. If people see me and they're like, I don't want to work with this guy because XYZ, or because he's advocating for psychedelics, or whatever, it's like, cool, I'm good with that. I don't mind that. I'll have that discussion with anyone, because I am what I am, right? And I think all of us could, if you're sacrificing parts of yourself for like financial gain, or for, just to have clout, I mean, you're not going to be happy at the end of the day. So,
Yeah, you need to be willing to stand on what you believe. You need to be willing to change your mind if you get new information, and you need to be,
yep,
willing to have those conversations. The older I get, the more I've come to realize that it really does not matter what you believe; it matters what you do. And if you believe the correct thing, but you don't do the right thing as you see it, you just are not somebody that I want to associate with. And I have absolutely no problem saying that out loud, publicly, recorded on the internet,
yep,
across various platforms, because those are the people that I want in my life, those who are willing to do that. I don't have to
yep,
agree with you. I don't even have to like you. But if you do those things, you have my respect. And like, we can move forward into a conversation, or into some sort of personal or professional relationship. If you're not, you're out.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that's, I mean, I think that's a very good rule to have in life, is like, kind of just, you know, keep to what you can control. And if be fluid, like if stuff changes, or like new information comes out, like I've definitely, I think we've all fallen victim at some point or another of like sharing something like too soon, and then something will come out. I've definitely deleted posts and been like, yo, my bad, I was wrong.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Yeah, there's a big difference between apologizing to the mob and recognizing you made a mistake and being like, "Yo, I goofed up. I was wrong about that thing. I'm going to correct it." I think like
yeah,
you've shared quite a bit, and I'm a huge fan. Still working on trying to get her on the podcast. I'm really close, but Barry Weiss's outfit, the Free Press, does a
Oh
really
yeah.
good job of covering the Israel-Palestine conflict in particular, and then just a great job in covering everything else, and is along the lines of what we've been talking about for the last few minutes, which is,
Yep.
hey, let's investigate some things, let's ask some questions, let's have some conversations, and let's not make binary black and white zero sum assumptions about people up front. Um,
Yep.
let's investigate, let's have a conversation, and see where it goes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's, I mean, now more than ever, and I think it's one of the interesting trends I've seen on the internet, as of, I'd say, like the last 2 years, are the pages that will like shame people for stuff.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if you, and it's people will send me stuff from those pages. And yeah, sometimes it's like warranted. There's some stuff there, but at the same time, to publicly shame someone on the internet and just feed the trolls, it's pretty disheartening, I guess, as a society to look at that happening. It's I'm not like one of those people that's out with like a like end bullying, like those signs, because you
Yeah.
know um but I look at that and I'm like, man, like what could you be doing with that time? Like there's so many other things that you can be doing with that time.
Yeah. Yeah. No.
So I think we're in a tough space post pandemic where people are trying to figure out all these things again,
Yeah.
and navigate life in real time, because time became this weird construct during COVID.
Yeah.
So
Well, yeah,
yeah,
it's post. I mean, for our community, it's post COVID, it's post GWAT. This episode will go live next week, so it'll be before. But I interviewed Marty Scoveland Jr. and Joe Kent
nice.
about Shannon, about their book about Shannon, and it's like, dude, the way that they kind of like laid out the GWAT, I just had never really thought about it that way before. I mean, nobody had, because we didn't have all the intel, and a lot of it's still classified. But even what they've released in the book is, it kind of puts things into a perspective that I'd never really thought about before. And then you add COVID. So we spent 20 years, not we, obviously you and I, but like collectively as a community, we spent 20 years fighting a war, and people who had never deployed at a cadence the way that we deployed, even flightline people like me deploying, 6 months, 6 months on, 6 months off, 6 months on, 6 months like that. Like even flightline people didn't do that before. And then you look at the soft community, look at all these different people for 20 years did a very highly concentrated version of something that we were unprepared for. Then we come out of that kind of and get into COVID, where time is, like you said, felt like a total flat circle. And then the fall of HKIA, and then you and others are doing what you're doing to get people out. And then now we're like, wait, are we good here? Like, are we good for a little bit, or
Yeah,
are we not? Like, do we just have to kind of always be on edge? And then to your point, people are throwing rocks, throwing stones at other people that are just trying to have something to say. Like, I always try to make fun of myself as much as I can, because I want this content to be practical and helpful. And if it's not practical and helpful, then I'll quit. And so it's like, I don't fashion myself as some sort of guru. It's just, I'm somebody who's learned some things and is still learning things, and wants to have conversations with people like you who are still learning things, to build an iterative process that people can follow along with, to try some new things, get some new information, to see if we can maybe see some success. Like, that's it. It's not like the meme pages that are like, oh, if somebody tells you how to transition out of the military, they don't know what they're talking about. I mean, I agree by and large, which is why I'm not trying to tell anybody how. I'm just exposing people to information that I have and trying to get information from other people.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, it's not linear, right? Like people get out and you're gonna go up and then you're gonna stumble, and then like divorces happen, and unfortunate like deaths happen, and all kinds of stuff happens that's gonna kind of cause you to reassess and reevaluate where you're at. And I mean, I had no plan with my transition. I think we've talked about it before, like my DD-214 and that whole process. Do you know that story?
No.
Dude, so when I got out, the Air Force didn't issue me a DD-214. Like I went to personnel. I left. I actually had to work a shift the day I went into terminal. So I worked a 24-hour shift, got off the ambulance, and went to out process, because we had no like manpower. It was, I yeah, that's a whole thing. But So I go to sign out, and there was a brand new airman working at personnel, and I'm talk about this in the YouTube video I'm going to be releasing soon. But to kind of speed this along, I sign out, I text a friend, and he's like, "Yeah, you're good, dude. Like they'll mail it to you." And I go home, and nothing ever shows up. I'm like, what is this? So I start making phone calls. It took me almost a year to get it. Like I have a congressional letterhead attached to my DD-214 that says like this is an actual DD-214 because the Air Force never made one.
Dude,
So that was like, talk about a stumble, and like not all my plans like blew up in my face, and I couldn't do anything. I couldn't go to school. I couldn't do anything. So
oh my gosh.
um, yeah, and I've heard a few instances of that happening, specifically in the Air Force.
Yeah.
I don't know about other branches because they actually hand their people there's always those, bless you, there's always those videos of people like getting like the comedy videos and stuff. And like,
Yeah.
yeah, the Air Force should
It's like,
probably do that.
I always tell my funny personnel story. When I was at Lakenheath, I was trying to deploy one more time to Bagram. I deployed twice. I did six on, six off, six on, six back, and I was getting ready to start
Heavy.
terminal like towards the end of that. And I was like, there was a guy who's having a kid, and he had missed his other kid's birthday and some other things. And I'm single. I don't have any dependents. Sure, I was going to make some additional tax-free income. It wasn't wholly, just like the most selfless act on my part, but still at the same time, I went to the unit and I was like, hey, can I just deploy in this guy's stead, so he can stay home for his kid's birth and all that good stuff, and I'll go and be fine. They're like, no, but you can re-enlist. I was like, no, I'd like to extend my enlistment if that's possible. And they're like, no, you can't do that. And I'm like, all right, cool, then I'm out, peace. And then come to find out, you can do that under some circumstances. I've heard of lots of people that extended under the exact same circumstances, and it's like, I don't remember that person,
Yeah.
that list, from Adam, like whatever. It just, that kind of, the bureaucracy of it all though is just, it can be, yeah, it just.
Dude, there was always weird. Did you ever get overpaid?
I never got overpaid. No, thank God.
Dude, I did. Right
Yeah.
when I got to Germany, I got overpaid. And I was like, oh, I got all this extra money. That's pretty cool. And then, like, a couple months later, all this money disappears. I was like an E3. All this money just disappears. Or not even an E3. I think I was an E2 at the time. And all this money just disappears out of my account. I was like,
I would have
so,
been screwed at that age, at 18, 19, 20.
yeah.
Especially like deploying and going TDY the way that I was. If I'd have got overpaid, I would have been in big trouble, because that money would have been gone very, very quickly.
I think I was too, because so my first unit actually forced us, and only one dude I know didn't do it. They forced us to buy cars because we lived on Ramstein but worked at Landstuhl.
Oh,
So like, you have to buy a car. I'm like, I have to buy one? Like, you're not gonna buy it for me? I have to buy it.
yeah. You can
So
government issue me a car anytime
yeah,
you want there, homie. I'm not gonna, like, yeah, that's
I
ridiculous.
bought one. It was great. I bought a Passat from like a tech sergeant, and it was the like four motion Passat. It was my favorite car, man. It was
I had
awesome.
when I was at Lakenheath in England, I had an American spec 1992 Honda Civic. I bought it from a tech sergeant for like $700. I don't even think I ever got it insured. Fucking just disaster, absolute disaster. All right,
Nice.
I have a call that I've got to jump onto here in about 5 minutes, so I want to wrap some things up. This will not be the
Yeah,
last time that we do this. I'm glad we
yeah,
finally did. Obviously, we're friends, and
same.
we're going to work together at some point here, hopefully very soon. Depending on how that one project that I'm talking to that guy goes. But where can folks find you? Where do you want to drive traffic? Where can I collaborate and tag?
Yeah, Instagram is at Paul Alkoby, and then YouTube. If you look up my name, it's on there. I forget what my like username on there is. I got to fix that. But yeah, those are the two primary. My business website is Aegis Studio. I don't have an Instagram or anything up for that yet, but that's kind of where I'm going with things, and I'm looking at some interesting options business wise right now that we'll talk offline about that stuff that I'm super excited about. But yeah, that's primarily it. And man, I'm just super stoked we finally got to do this. It's been awesome.
Me too, man. I appreciate it. Yeah, I'll tag and link and put all that stuff in the show notes. All right. So to end every episode, I ask an open-ended question. What's on your heart and your mind for our community right now? Could be a piece of advice, something you want to get off your chest, or something you want to reiterate from what we've already talked about today. But Paul, what's on your heart? What's on your mind?
Honestly, just a lot of growth. I'm seeing a lot of folks right now that are definitely going through it, but I'm also seeing a big not even a resurgence, but a whole new push for different types of options for veterans, whether it's coursework, coaching, various different things that I think are going to help move folks forward. And I think it's going to change a lot of the traditional options that we have currently.
Awesome.
So,
I love it.
yeah, man.
Any in particular you want to share right now?
I plugged them earlier, but I think the Mission After is going to be doing an amazing job. Absolutely love Heroic Hearts Project. They're, in my opinion, I mean, they help me tremendously. And then, I mean, we've been up with kind of the same people. So it's like any of those organizations that we've always talked about. I think really any veteran organizations out there that I've stumbled upon a few, like Stars and Stripes, I've only found recently. It looks like they're doing something really cool as well. And there's so many resources out there. So folks should really lean into them.
Yeah. PB Abate, Dead Reckoning Collective.
Yep.
We'll
DRC, man.
Yeah. Put a little something out there for everybody. But Paul, appreciate you, brother. Appreciate your time. Appreciate your energy. Appreciate your work. And we'll chat again soon.
Appreciate you, man. Take care.
Peace.
See you, bro.